Welcome back everybody to episode 8 of our programming subseries. We're going to be talking about functions, and they're also called methods, but we'll call them functions for now. So a function is just taking an input, doing stuff to that input, and producing an output. So in math we've seen functions, so a function we've denoted as f of x, and x is the input, so it's whatever's in the parentheses. And then on the other side of the equation we define how we're actually going to manipulate that input. So in this case we're doubling x and adding 1. So you can see here's a table of different inputs, what we're doing to those inputs, and then we're getting an output. So in math we only use numbers to create functions, but in programming we can use numbers and anything else that's a data type. So we can use booleans, we can use strings, we can use characters, we can use even classes, so data types that we've actually defined ourselves as programmers. So the general template of a function is to have a function name, and then before that we have the return type. So the return type just says what type of data the output is going to be. And then we have a list of parameters in parentheses. So the parameters are going to be used to actually create an output using this code. So here in the Eclipse IDE I've written a program that has 3 functions. It has a function called main, and as I've stated in a previous video, the main function will always be the function that first gets executed. So in every program you write, there will have to be a main function. You can see the return type on main is called void, and this is just meaning it's returning nothing. So void means nothing. So we're returning nothing from this function. And then we're passing in a parameter called args, and this is of type array, and it's a string array. So we haven't talked about an array. Just think of an array as like a list, and it's a list of strings, so words, it's a list of words. And since main is the first function that the program will look for when it starts to run, we're going to have to provide these parameters ourselves when we actually go to run this program. Okay, then we have 2 other functions. One's called double x, one's called append string. So for our double x, we have a return type of integer, so whatever we return as our output will have to be of type integer. We're passing in a integer variable called x, and this is called a parameter. So we have one parameter called x, and then in our function we're just doubling x and returning it. So since x is an integer, 2 times an integer is another integer, so that satisfies our return type. So here in our main we'll go ahead and exemplify the double x function. So we're getting a number from the user using this list of words. So we're setting the number equal to the integer version of the first position in the list of words. So just think about it that way. And then we're printing out whatever that original number is, and then we're calling the function. This is called calling a function. So we're calling the function called double x, and we're passing in the argument num. So there's a difference between a parameter and an argument. So the parameter is the actual thing that you say you're going to be using when you're calling the function. So when you're writing the function, you write the parameter, and in this case we called it x, and then when we call a function to actually use it, we pass in arguments. So the arguments are going to take the place of the parameter. So when we call the function double x, num is going to take the place of x, so we're going to be doubling num and returning that result. So then we're just printing that to the screen. Okay, let's go ahead and run this program as it is right now. So how I'm going to do this is I'm going to use what's called the command prompt, and the command prompt is just one of the basic ways to navigate your computer and run different programs. So we're going to find this file called functions.java, and I've already done that in the file explorer. So here it is. I'm going to copy this path, and I'm going to paste it in here to the command prompt. So cd just stands for change directory, and then we're changing to this directory. So there we go, and if I do dir for directory, this will print whatever's in that directory. So we have our file here, and to actually compile this Java file, we need to do Java C for compile, and then the name of the file, so functions.java. And if there's any weird stuff printing here, that means there's probably an error, but there was nothing printed here, so it compiled fine. So now we're going to run this by saying Java and then the name of the file without the extension. So you can see it's giving us an exception, and this is because we didn't provide any words after we went to run this. So when we said Java functions, basically this is us saying, okay, open this file functions.java and find the main function and start using it. So when we actually go to use our main function, we're trying to use a word in this list of words, but we didn't provide any word after we said find the main function. So to actually get this to work, we have to say Java functions and then give it a number, because that's what we're going to be using. So we'll say 2, and now you can see it says original number 2 and then number after function 4. So this is an argument that we pass directly into the command prompt, and it uses this argument in the actual function main. So it uses this parameter and sets it equal to num, and then we do stuff with it. So let's go ahead and comment out this section of the main, and we'll look at the other function we have. So our other function is called append strings, and it has a return type of string. So whatever we return from append strings has to be of type string. And you can see we have 0 parameters, so we can have as many or as little parameters as we want. And what we're doing here is we're asking the user for the first name, and then we're setting that to the first name variable. And then we're asking for the last name and setting that to the last name variable. And then we're creating this string called final string. And that's just equal to this big string here that uses that first name and last name. And then we're just returning as an output that final string, and we're using it up here. And we're setting it equal to a variable. So when we have a return type that's not void, we can set it to a variable of that same type. So we have a return type of string, and we're setting the return of this function append strings to this variable called thank you, and then we're just printing out whatever thank you is. After we save this file, let's go ahead and run it. So back in the command prompt, we need to recompile this file because it's different now. So we're going to say java c and then the file name. So again, functions.java. Hopefully there are no errors, and there aren't any errors, so we'll run it. So java functions, and it asks for my first name, so I'll give it Bob, and then McGuffin, and then it should say thank you Bob McGuffin for using this program. So what it did is it used our function. You can see it says thank you is equal to whatever append strings returns. So we got our first name, last name, and then created that final string and returned final string, and then set thank you equal to whatever this was, and then printed it. And you can see it did exactly that. So that's an introduction to functions, and we'll get into them a little more in the next few videos.